Hello, podcast listener. The topic today is Hispanics and Wine and the fairly recent LatinX State of the Wine Industry Second Annual Summit. Are people of color an integral part of the wine industry? Absolutely. And my energetic guest today is going to impress upon you the importance of understanding their contributions. We're on the wine road to downtown Napa, California.
I think it's equally as important to recognize that many of these people have been around for decades and just haven't been given the platform like the Mandavis or other staple individuals.
My guest today is Gabriela Fernandez, and she was heavily involved with the LatinX State of the Wine Industry's Second Annual Summit, held in early December. Keep listening to learn about Gabriela's passion for the wine industry, her advocacy for diversity, and what inspired Gabriela to launch the Big Sip series. And she's also the morning show host of Mega Mix on 1440 AM radio in Napa. Yeah, she's quite the dynamo. I'm Jeff Davis. Thanks for listening today. On the Wine Road is brought to you by my local sponsor, Sonoma Clean Power. For those of you who live in the area, you can learn how your actions can make a greater impact with clean, renewable energy at poweringeverydaymoments.org. That's poweringeverydaymoments.org. Okay, let's get into the interview. You know, this is just the second time someone has invited me into their studio.
I'm excited to have you. I always get excited whenever I can get guests in here. So thank you for joining me and making the trip.
Of course. I should start today by pointing out that Mega Mix and the music station The Vine are owned by a Hispanic company, Wind Down Media.
Yes, sir. Two incredible Latinos, Will and Julissa Marcencia, partners in life and partners in business. They traveled here and came originally from Los Angeles, so Southern California, and really wanted to create a different space for radio, audio, media, broadcasting, and personally for myself, just seeing two Latinos in that space, building a business, which you don't often see all the time, or if you do, you know that there's probably barriers to entry stacked up against you, but they've not only done it, they've done an incredible job at just seeing, originally when I was also in the old studio, and seeing what they've done with their time since they initiated to building out this beautiful space that we have here at the Foundation area, and how they've really embedded themselves in the community, been that support and the lifeline during some pretty drastic moments, wildfires, the pandemic. It feels so great to see how they care, and they constantly talk about not only are we delivering entertainment to the community and news, but how are we empowering ourselves to give back, and how are we empowering the community to feel like they are, a collective.
Well, they really upped the game with this brand new studio. I mean, it's beautiful.
And I know people come and visit and they're just like, oh, wow, this is like really nice. And I'm like, I've never worked for any other studio, but thanks.
Well, you're a perfect fit, man. You seem like you're a natural at this. And I'm wondering, do they call you Gabby? Because I can see you.
They do, Gabby for short. When I was younger, and I sometimes joke about this now, when I was younger, my teachers used to make fun of me and say, my mother named me right, but they would say it with this tone that it was something I should be ashamed of. And so I hated my name when I was younger. And then as I got older, I just embraced, I talk a lot. It comes very natural to me. I love talking with people. I love learning about their walks of life, what makes them them, how they got to where they got. I just think we all have a story to share. So I really don't mind talking a lot. And now I'm just a lucky one that gets paid to do it for a living.
Yeah, that's great. And I'm sure they're happy to have you here. We have so much to talk about today. I was invited to attend the LatinX State of the Wine Industry's Second Annual Summit, and I'm so sorry I couldn't make it to the event. I was looking forward to it, but would you say it was a success?
It was definitely a success. I think everybody has a different definition of what success looks like. For me, seeing a packed room, hearing comments of people feeling
empowered.
Empowered is definitely a word that comes to mind. Feeling represented and visible, like their stories mattered. Having a platform, a visible platform where people could hear these stories on a massive scale and relate to them. I think that relatability piece is super important and definitely one of the pillars for why we even decided to put something like this together.
That's great. It was a collaboration between the organizations Hispanics and Wine, Uncorked and Cultured, and the Big Sip. And you were involved with two of those entities.
I am. Yes. So The Big Sip is my podcast that I created originally when this used to be a talk show radio host. And then I was also booted off when it turned into Megamix. Other really great ways for us to be able to put out that audio. But that was really my way of trying to uplift the voices in the industry. You know, as a Latina woman in this industry, oftentimes, you know, it can be a little difficult to feel seen or to feel like there's a space carved out for you, and it can be very isolating when you attend trade events or just go anywhere, and people kind of question, you know, how much knowledge you might have or the credibility for why you're belonging in that room. And so I know that there are many, many other people, and not only wine, but in various other industries that have often neglected to uplift the voices of often underrepresented individuals. And so that was really my passion project, to create a space for people of color in wine, art, food, tech, health. And then I was very honored last year when Hispanics in Wine became an official nonprofit organization, when Maria and Lydia, the co-founders, asked if I would join the board. And so yes, technically a twofold there.
You know, I looked at the list of the board members on the website, and man, impressive people. Holy cow.
It's really, really amazing. And I think that's a part and importance of community, is when you have all of these individuals who are doing great work individually, and you can collectively get them together, really empowering things happen.
Yeah, I would imagine. And it seems like they bring different strengths to the organization and have a great understanding of the wine industry.
Mm-hmm. And I think that passion continues to carry and uplift them through those moments where we might not know the answer, but rest assured we're going to go ask all the questions we need to in order to find out.
So the theme of the summit was Somos Visibles. Did I say that right?
You said it right.
Unheard Voices and Vino, and focused on celebrating the diversity, perseverance, and legacy-building resilience of the Latino communities, which was referred to as, appropriately, the backbone of America's wine industry. And it is. And I liked the impressive list of wine organizations and wineries who sponsored the event, which I think indicates the great respect they have for the Hispanic community. And I'd like to run through the list, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
There were 6 wineries from Jackson Family Wines, which included Kendall Jackson, Murphy Good, and La Crema, the Duckhorn Portfolio, Conundrum Wines, RD Winery, which is where the event was held. It's a beautiful property. I have to go and see that sometime.
Gorgeous. If someone hasn't been to RD Winery, highly, highly recommend. First stop as you're coming into Napa. It's definitely a spot that you don't want to miss out. And it's actually run and operated by the first woman-owned CEO Vietnamese person in the entire Napa Valley. So again, as we talk about diversity and what we want the future of the industry to look like, different wines that you can explore with different foods and flavor profiles. It's just a really exciting thing to see as the entrance, if you will, that the heavenly doors welcoming you to Napa Valley.
Yeah, the southern end of Napa Valley if you're coming out from San Francisco. Also, Taub Family Selections, Colangelo and Partners PR, New Frontier Wine Company, as well as Napa Valley Vintners and Mexican American Vintners Association. So all of these organizations were sponsoring the event, as well as a few others. And it's just an indicator of their respect for the Hispanic community and the fact that they understand the contributions that they have made over the many decades.
I hope that they understand. And, you know, I would also equally say from a personal perspective, sometimes it doesn't feel like that. And I think that's the exact reason for why the event like the Latinx Wine Summit was so important, is to say, hey, we are visible. We are the unheard voices that you don't hear about in wine. We are the voices that, are often left out of the conversation. Oftentimes, our physical labor force is utilized to create the product, but how often are our narratives intertwined into the end result, that story that we tell about that product, about the winery, et cetera. And being able to create a platform where we can really highlight that, and having incredible sponsorships, like you mentioned, a plethora of organizations, businesses that have some heavy weight in the industry, and to have them invested in not only the work that we do, but in, again, acknowledging what we're calling out is something that
and I'll take it a step further to emphasize the strong relationships that winery owners have developed with Hispanic families with their work in the vineyards, not only as vine pruners and grape pickers, but as vineyard managers as well. And some of the families have worked with wineries for like 20, 30, even 40 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not just in how you care for the land, right? There's a term that we mentioned during the LatinX Wine Summit that I've heard heavily used. And the first time I actually heard it was through IVOY, which is a nonprofit organization out of Oregon, referring to people who work in the vineyards as vineyard stewards, because that's exactly who they are. They're stewards of the land, stewards of these beautiful, beautiful vines that sometimes have decades of roots that have existed here. And you want to be able to care and take care of them just as great as you can, because that's where the initial sort of end result is going to come from, right? Making sure that you're appropriately tending to those vines. And they not only do that during beautiful days where it's sunny, but they do that through disastrous moments like we saw during not only the pandemic, where health concerns were an issue, access to that healthcare was an issue for many migrant farm workers, but also during the wildfires, where everyone else has the ability to stay home, seek their refuge, wear a mask, and yet, we're met with another population who gets a word or a directive as kind of saying, hey, well, you kind of are the economy here, so we don't have the ability, we can't afford to simply pause and stop it and not have you show up, and so what kind of sacrifices does that sometimes entail?
They may have felt like the lucky ones who actually got to go out and get together with some other people and work outdoors.
During the pandemic, yeah, possibly. During the wildfires, I don't know if I'd want to be breathing that smoke.
No. And the rains, and the atmospheric river.
Hard work, certainly hard work. And so again, how do we tell our stories? How do we include not only the hands that tend to those vineyards, but again, Somos Visibles also calls out to Latinx identifying, Hispanic identifying individuals who exist in so many other areas of the wine industry. We're not a monolith.
Right,
we're not all the same person. We're not all Mexican. We're not all vineyard workers. And those two things can be very beautiful, but knowing that we all have different experiences as well. And so being able to showcase those different experiences, those different cultures, the different areas that we impact in the wine industry is equally as important.
I hate to admit it, but I had to look up what Latinx refers to. What is Latinx? And I discovered it's the Hispanic version of LGBTQ.
Yeah, so Latinx was a term created, and I genuinely can't tell you who coined it. There's a lot of hesitancy around using it in the Hispanic community because people so often say, that wasn't a term that our people coined. But where I think it holds a lot of value is the acknowledgement of non-binary individuals and knowing that you might not identify as a Latina or a Latino. And so being able to hold space for Latinx just encompasses all people who identify with that Latin Hispanic heritage.
Yeah. It's getting so complicated these days to address somebody.
Yeah, well, I think, there's also power in sometimes just asking people,
Sure.
how they want to identify.
She's Gabriela Fernandez. Earlier, I mentioned some of the impressive members of the Hispanics in Wine organization. You can see their extensive group of people and what their specialties are at HispanicsInWine.com. Then click Meet the Community. You'll see Gabriela on that page. The organization, Uncorked and Cultured, that supports Black and brown wine entrepreneurs, can be found at uncorkedandcultured.com. Gabriela can also be found on Instagram at The Big Sip Series. I'll return with our conversation after this short break. This is On the Wine Road podcast.
Life is made up of everyday moments. The best breakfast pancakes and bedtime stories, staying up too late and getting up too early. As your public power provider, we at Sonoma Clean Power thrive on sustaining everyday moments, and we do so with a clean energy future in mind. We know these moments are cherished forever. Together, we can protect today's moments and those yet to come. Learn how your actions can make an even greater impact at poweringeverydaymoments.org.
I'm back with Gabriela Fernandez and the topic of the LatinX State of the Wine Industry Summit, held this past December. At this point, I asked her what were some of the takeaways from the summit. Was she encouraged or maybe even surprised by some of the success stories she heard.
I wouldn't necessarily say surprised by the success stories. I worked very heavily with all of the panelists that were selected for the LatinX Wine Summit. Inspired certainly comes to mind. The people, again, we're talking about resiliency, right, in the work that they've done. And the people who were on that stage have built a great deal of resiliency generationally sometimes, as we heard with the first panel, Cristina and Daniela, whose parents have lineage, their family, their roots have lineage in agricultural work, and talking about how they've each found their own footing and how they also choose to give back and try to support farm workers today, knowing what they saw throughout their time growing up. In our pandemic perseverance and deep-rooted payoffs panel, the resilience that people can have to be met with a pandemic, right? Something that I had certainly never gone through in my lifetime, and along with so many other people. And there's just this cultural notion in the Hispanic and Latino community that even when you're met with that adversity, the answer is not throwing your hands up in the air and being like, what are we going to do? Where do we go from here? You just have to keep the foot on the gas pedal. And even though you don't know what direction that's going in, what exactly you're going to do, you just know like you can't stop because you have a family to support. You need to find your reason for living and moving forward, even if it's baby steps, even if it's inches, that as long as you're keeping that path moving forward, that always is going to feel good. And so to see people met with the many, many challenges that so many of us were faced with, and to see how they took that moment and propelled them into something that they are now reaping incredible, incredible payoffs. I think also it was another great takeaway to see how much this was needed. The amount of people that kept coming up to me and just, my ears always listening as a radio show host, you're always kind of picking up on people's conversations. What's trending? What's not? Right. But even just hearing them say, wow, I can't believe this really didn't exist before I came here today. Like there's really no centralized platform for people to hear stories of all different types of Latinos in different backgrounds and different cultures. And to see people get excited about that, the amount of, again, representation and visibility and the access that we were able to provide, that was another huge takeaway that I just think is just so powerful.
I saw that there were 3 panel discussions mixed in throughout the summit. The first was Building Your Legacy in Wine, then Pandemic Perseverance and Deep-Rooted Payoffs, which you alluded to. And the third was Allyship. And you were the moderator for all those.
I'm not shocked at this point.
I know everyone, there was a conversation at first. They're just like, are you comfortable just doing this many hours of just you speaking? And I'm like, yeah, it actually seems like it's going to go by really, really well. I was very tapped into the conversation. I love to do my research. And so being able to talk previously with many of these panelists and just share with them my thoughts on where I thought the conversation could go, their thoughts on what they really wanted to share. I just knew at the end of the day, it's like we're all just enjoying a nice glass of wine, getting to know each other at a bar.
Yeah, right.
Earlier we glanced over Uncorked and Cultured. So tell us what that program's about.
Yeah, Uncorked and Cultured. It was actually founded by Angela McCrae, incredible woman who was a co-organizer in the overall Latinx Wine Summit, has incredible media production background. During our first year, so this last year in 2022 was our first in-person event. She was really instrumental with not only building out the virtual side for the first year, but then making sure we could have that hybrid role in the second year. She's done work previously for PBS and different film festivals and things like that. And so we were very happy to have her collaborate with us.
It sounds like there were some very talented people involved.
Really amazing people dedicated to overall ensuring that the future of the wine industry is colorful, is equitable, and is accessible.
That's one way to look at it. It's colorful. I was happy to see a portion of the ticket sales from the event will be funding the upcoming 2023 program, focusing on supporting the Hispanic and Latinx wine community.
Yeah, so a portion of the ticket sales are actually directed to the nonprofit organization Hispanics in Wine as a means for us to continue to support, provide mentorship, provide scholarship opportunities for the advancement of education and other programming engagement opportunities for Hispanic and Latino identifying individuals who want to either kickstart their wine career, continue to further and develop it, or other enthusiasts who want to get their footing in the door. One of the barriers to entry is sometimes this industry, it's all about who you know. And so being able to have a space where anybody can come join and try to access that information, people, ideas on, or just suggestions and advice on, where do I go from here? Is there financial help? What does that look like? And create that community is pivotal for what we're looking to do in the future growth.
It is a supportive, collaborative industry where nearly everyone is willing to help each other out, regardless of color or background.
Mm-hmm. As you can see with all of our sponsors.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I guess what I'm not familiar with is every winery has its growth challenges, but has the Hispanic community, have they been having success with their family-run wineries?
Not being a winery owner myself, I don't feel like I can adequately answer that question from a financial or fiscal perspective on growth. But seeing the footprint of how many Latinos are finally getting a voice and a platform to showcase the work that they do, I would definitely say there's a large amount of growth in that. I think it's equally as important to recognize that many of these people have been around for decades and just haven't been given, again, the platform like the Mandavis or like, other staple individuals have been pivotal towards what people think of as the wine industry. All great individuals at the forefront. But again, some certain voices that maybe have been left out or not as carefully paid attention to. For example, one of the people who was on the first panel, Building Your Legacy in Wine, was Daniela Bazan, whose grandpa actually started off in the vineyards in the early Bracero program. So we're talking about the 40s, where your lineage and generation roots, in the industry go back to, almost 100 years ago. We're inching towards that. Yeah. But until maybe just now in the last 10 years, have people started to know, oh, you make wine? Oh, you own your own winery? Oh, there's actual vintners out here that are of Latino descent who are winery owners. And it comes as a shock to people without knowing. Again, we have been stitched into this overall industry for decades. And so it just warms my heart to see that there are more people now even willing to try other wines and just kind of dive into, what's this person's story? And I think there's so much of an ethos that comes with a lot of people's experiences right now. They really want to know, like, what's the story? Like, what am I investing my dollars in? What are the values? What are the ethics here? And sometimes people find themselves at an intersection where one of those happens to be a wine that's made by a Hispanic producer. The LA Times just did a great article on so many different Latino vintners and Latina vintners in the wine industry from even multiple wine growing regions. Right, Napa Valley is fantastic. Sonoma's fantastic. But you have some really incredible folks in Oregon. You've got incredible folks out in Paso Robles, Washington State. And so, being able to, again, not only highlight Latinos in different wine growing regions and different parts of the business. And so I think there's definitely a lot of a larger movement there and visibility that you can find with wineries. And so to answer your question in a very long way, I would say, yes, there's definitely some success and growth there.
I thought I'd take a moment to share with you the wineries who appeared on two of the panels of the LatinX Wine Summit. There was Cristina Gonzalez of Gonzalez Wine Company, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and produces wine from Southern Oregon and Washington. Miriam Puentes and Lola Llamas were on hand. They have their own brands, Miriam's Anrama Cellars and Lola's Llamas Family Wines. But during the pandemic, they collaborated on a sparkling wine they call Las Amigas Cuvée, and were the first two Latinas to collaborate on a sparkling wine project in Napa Valley. Also, Nancy Ulloa of Ulloa Wines, based in Paso Robles. She's the first Latina winemaker in Paso, which I found hard to believe. And if she isn't busy enough, Gabriela works with Napa's Duckhorn portfolio.
I do. I have been with Duckhorn since early 2018. 2019? Yeah, early 2019. And I actually manage and oversee 6, sometimes 7, depending on if we decide to do some things for Decoy from an events perspective. We don't necessarily have a winery for it, which is why I mentioned that. But primarily 6 out of the 8 wineries I manage and oversee. I curate all of the event and lifestyle experiences for their brands, of which include Canvasback out in Washington State. You've got Goldeneye in Mendocino County, Calera in Hollister Hills, which we acquired in 2017, as well as Duckhorn Vineyards here in Napa, in addition to Migration, which recently opened up in Napa about a year ago, and then Paradox, which is our blend house.
You are crazy busy. How do you fit it into your schedule? And you're here every morning.
And I'm here every morning, rise and shine, rise and grind.
No kidding, rise and grind. I was thinking, after reading your emails, I could kind of tell what kind of person you are. I can see that you're energetic and vivacious. So I did a quick search and came up with Latina Vivas.
Thank you. I love that. Which is funny because my social media handle is Latina G. And for the lot, because I just love, again, Latinidad for me is huge. It's so heavily ingrained in how I identify. But I just thought it was funny because one time someone was like, oh yeah, you're Latin ag. And I was like, what? And they're like, Latin ag for agriculture. And I was like, I've never even thought of that. But ironically, it works because I am in the agricultural industry.
Absolutely. Sure. So how did you get to this point? Not the radio side, but were your parents in the wine industry?
Yeah. I think it's a collection of a couple of things. My parents were involved in the wine industry. My dad was a farm worker for a large portion of his time when he first immigrated here from Mexico. I saw the hardships that he went through, and it was a little girl running around in the vineyards. To me, something fun because you live that carefree life and you're not there to actually pick in the fields. But I would see how tired he would be when he'd come back home, or challenges that he went through with health, or just, rights at that time, labor rights, which have improved, always improvements in every industry. And my mom immigrated here. Actually, she was a refugee from El Salvador. And when she came here, one of the first things that she started to do was to work with Tella de Winter, who ran an immigration services company and helped provide a lot of documentation and permanent residency to immigrants that were living in the Napa Valley. Eventually, she was blessed and found a family who really wanted to support her educational dreams. And so she got her associate's degree at PUC in business. And then from there, she has been an HR involved person in the industry her entire life thereon, since she was probably about early mid-20s. Is now the HR director for Camus Vineyards, which is actually how I got my footing in the industry. Obviously, being born and raised here, I jokingly say that wine is ingrained in your blood, but it's because of her and that initial, step forward that I took of why I got in. She had just started at Camus, and I was 15 and a half looking for a summer internship. And it started off in the tasting room, mainly working phones and office administrative stuff. But there was a really great mentor there. His name was Jeff Weiss. He's no longer with the company. But he really looked at me and was like, you're very eager to learn, and you ask a lot of questions. And I do. I love learning about so many things. I think that we're all students of life, and you don't know the answers to questions you're not willing to ask. And I wanted to know as much as I could. And so he really allowed me throughout several years. I didn't leave Camus until I was 21, on and off, obviously going to college. But when I would come back home, he'd be like, well, what are you interested in exploring now? And what are you interested in exploring now?
Good for him.
And really allowed me to dive into so many parts of the business. And so I was able to do a little bit of sales and learn from the sales director at that time. I dove into marketing and learned from the marketing team at that time. Alen Weiss ran the events, and I helped support her with her events at some times. And so I just really got to learn so many parts of the business, the shipping and compliance side, and how that all worked, which is a mind-boggling experience.
Yeah, I heard bad things about that.
Kudos to anybody who's involved in that. It is an area of the industry that requires patience, and we thank you. And so I really credit, honestly, that work experience as being pivotal to me deciding that I could really take my future into whatever I wanted.
Getting back to your mother, she's a great example of those who have the educational support and financial support and the confidence that rises from receiving that kind of support. They can do anything. They just need the opportunity to make that happen.
Amen. And I think that's what it goes back to what we're trying to do with Hispanics in wine.
Yeah.
So much of the barriers to entry for any job, education, just your advancement in life is one, I think community is really important, being able to have that like ecosystem and support system to get you there. But what are those other barriers to entry that you don't have access to that, if you've got the grit and you've got the drive and you just need all of these other tools to assist you, like the world's your oyster.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And kudos to you for being the voice for your culture and community. I think you're doing an excellent job.
Thank you.
I'm incredibly impressed.
Thank you. I've got a great network of people who inspire me consistently and remind me why we do what we do. And I'm just very, very blessed to be in community with some incredible people. Maria and Lydia being two of those people. Angela's a great, great person in the industry to know and to be friends with. And then my personal favorite, I have to give her a shout out, Miriam Ahmed, who's my best friend, partner in crime, and is equally just blazing trails ahead of her for so many people.
And if you want to hear some really good Spanglish, be sure to tune in to Mega Mix in Napa Valley, KVON.com, and you can hear Gabriela.
Yes, you can.
Latina Vivas.
Viva las Latinas.
Once again, for details, visit LatinXSummit.com and keep your eyes open for the 2023 event later this year. You can also search HispanicsandWine.com and UncorkedandCultured.com. Thanks to Gabriela Fernandez for a fun and educational experience. Today's episode was written, recorded, and produced by me. Please subscribe to On the Wine Road podcast so each episode will automatically appear on your favorite platform. And I appreciate a positive review if that's an option. Find images, wine news, trivia, and more interviews at onthewineroad.us. I'm on Facebook as On the Wine Road and Instagram as JD Wine Road. I'll talk to you again soon as I share more from my travels on the Wine Road.